Next, we welcome Kofi Amoo-Gottfried, the VP of Marketing for DoorDash. He's had a career of leading great brands, including Facebook and Bacardi, and was agency side at FCB and founder of Publicis West Africa. He's won AdColor's Rockstar Award, and he's married to his high school sweetheart.
How are you, my friend?
Gary, what's good, man?
It's a real pleasure, Kofi, and congrats. I know it's exciting times back at the home base for your company.
Indeed.
Let's just get right into it because I've been really dying to see what your take was going to be on this. Which consumer behavior shifts will be key to driving growth in 2021 from your perspective?
Yeah, Gary, there's two that I'm thinking about. So the first is that there's like a demand for comfort, right? So we released this trend report that we do every year at DoorDash. It's called the State of Flavor. And it looked at like what people were ordering on the platform, right? So the top three things: chicken fingers and fries, chicken sandwich, and mac and cheese. But then if you looked at like what things were trending in terms of like, you know, year over year percentages over 1,000 going into the next year, sausage, egg, and cheese on a biscuit, create your own omelet, carrot cake, right? So that's just like the food category, but it was all comfort foods.
Kofi, which one of those comfort foods that you just mentioned is your personal favorite, and which one do you, and which just of those? Not your overall Kofi spectrum.
just this thing. Okay.
Which one's your favorite of that little group?
Ooh, wow. Maybe sausage, egg, and cheese on a biscuit, man.
Respect.
But I think this is a trend that we're seeing across multiple categories. I think many of you guest speakers today will be wearing like nice shirts and sweatpants, right? Like we're in this mode now.
No pants at all.
Maybe no pants at all. But we're in this mode where comfort is what people are focused on. I think, you know, I look at categories like makeup, and you think about, we've all been sitting here and people have not been wearing makeup. So what does that mean for like when the world opens back up?
Or new clothes, you know.
Or new clothes.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's sneakers. I mean, my sneaker game is whack right now.
It's gone. It's over.
Yeah.
Your sneaker game is like socks under a desk. So
I really like that. I think you nailed it.
Yeah, so I think comfort is going to be a big one. I expect to see that go on. The other one, which is on totally opposite side of this, is a demand for corporations to have a conscience, right? I mean, we've talked for years, Gary. You've seen all the reports, like consumers want to vote with their dollars and they want to align with their values. And I think that's been true, but I think it's only been true up to a point. You know, all of us have been like, I've certainly done this. Delete Uber, and then you open the Lyft app and there's no car, and you're like, maybe I'll actually use it.
And you know what it also is look, when you know, businesses at scale inherently are going to have some sort of social vulnerability.
Correct.
I mean, you can't wear a designer clothing. You can't wear clothes.
You can't do anything. That's
if you're extreme on the environment, because textiles are doing more damage than a lot of sectors.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You know, I've been scolded for a plastic bottle by one of my friends while they're wearing a Gucci belt, and I'm like, do the math.
You're like, what are you doing?
Gucci belt first, bro. You know, and I think I think it's a very important era, because I do think this is going to come up more. However, it gets into incredibly interesting territories, because at some level, once you start picking at this, everyone's going to be vulnerable about something.
Yeah, this is exactly right. I think the thing that's interesting is, before was the vulnerability was actually confined to your core business, right? So it's like, if you're like a textiles company, I'm going to talk to you about the environment. I think the big shift that we've seen this year is that all the third rail stuff that companies could actually sit out, you can't sit out anymore, right? So for a long time, when issues of race, neutrality was a safe haven. Like, no brands were expected to speak out about race. It's like, hey, sit this one out. Like, I'll talk about environmental, I'll talk about some other thing. I will not engage on this issue. What's been fascinating this year is that, like, silence is being interpreted as speech. So if you didn't say anything, people are going to have questions. But if you do say something and you can't back it up, and this is the point that Stephanie was making, you're going to get hammered for that as well.
The truth is, you know, somebody said to me the other day, Gary, you talk about the same shit. I'm like, exactly. I'm very focused on talking about the things I know. And I have no interest, because I put myself so out there. I have no interest to talk about things I don't know. I need to come in with curiosity and empathy and those things. I think it's wild. Let me ask you a question. What about speed of creative? You know, you're a more contemporary, modern company. You come from this incredible background creatively and marketing wise. You know, curious about your juxtaposition of your career now that you've got a couple years underneath it. You know, my perspective coming into the industry was it was unconscious. I was fascinated by the lack of speed.
Yep.
At DoorDash, speed of create, you know, especially a company that's going to understand things like CAC and LTV on an app.
That's right.
You know, I would argue that probably a little bit more of the challenge is building top of the funnel brand because the math stuff's there. But what about the creative output? Because I think the math-based companies tend to understand a lot, except brand building in the lower funnel and not enough volume of creative, and saying a channel doesn't work when they only did 7 creative variables when there's so much more. And it's less about iterations, about ideas and creative in that world.
Right.
You know, knowing your background a little bit, I was like excited to ask you about this. All that I just threw at you, break that down, your perspective, what you're seeing, where you've got advancements to go at DoorDash, or what you've seen work well.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. And I think, like, to your point, you know, I grew up on the agency side where, like, you know, preciousness was the vector rather than speed, and sort of
and but subjective opinions.
100%.
I hate that shit. I hate that shit.
Yeah, because like that's not the answer, right? The answer is like actually figuring out what's working and what isn't. I think what's been fascinating at DoorDash is I think we found a good balance. So, you know, a really good example from earlier this year is like we turned around a fully integrated campaign in 6 days when the pandemic hit. I think we were the first major brand to go to market and say, actually, hey, the job right now is like, let's not speak about DoorDash. Let's encourage people to support all of the restaurants, whether they're doing it on our platform or on other platforms. But we turned that around in 6 days, you know, which like didn't even feel possible from a trafficking perspective. But turns out you can do that. And we did that all the way through the funnel. And I think we're figuring out working with, you know, in the bottom of the funnel, in the middle of the funnel, we have a wide variety of partners we're working with to create lots of options around creative, right? We want to have the brand consistency. We want to have the brand point of view, but we also want to like create the space to figure out what's actually working rather than assuming that we're going to have all the answers.
Finding right.
To your point.
We call it at VaynerX finding right instead of having the audacity of thinking you're right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Talk to me about TikTok. You know, the consumer attention, you know, we're OG enough to see Facebook go from a college kids platform to a great grandparents platform.
That's right.
Are you starting to take that platform seriously?
Yeah, we are. Look, I think we started this year. I don't think we figured it out, in all honesty. I think this past year, this was the first year that we started playing on TikTok. We did some interesting stuff, again, early on in the pandemic around driving support for restaurants that resonated really well. We participated in this influencer challenge called the Do Your Part Challenge in partnership with Feeding America to drive meal donations, but also to drive restaurant support. We saw a ton of traction around that, like billions of impressions. So we know there's something there. I don't think we figured out how to do this consistently yet. So this is one of the areas that we're going to be looking at going into 21.
What about OTT commercials? You know, this really interesting evolution of Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Hulu. You know, obviously not every OTT has commercial infrastructure, but is that something you're spending more time thinking about? Because I see that eating up a ton of the commercial television space, but it has more DNA in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, like buying and creative. Has that hit your radar? Is that a debate internally?
100%. We're spending a lot of time on that, Gary. Like we're finding that like those spaces are like gold, deeply measurable. Like
only underpriced because of demand. Yeah,
correct.
Supply, you know, demand issue.
Correct.
That's good for you.
Correct.
Does that put challenges on your creative agencies to make 5 commercials that are quality for the price of what the kind of things you were accustomed to years ago? Has that pressure on the cost of creative? I mean, this all goes to one place. Creative's too expensive in the advertising world. Are you starting to have those conversations?
Yeah, I think we're trying to figure it out. Yeah, I don't know that we've cracked that particular thing yet, because I do think there's things that we want to do at a very high fidelity, right? So but then I think the question
is, does it need to cost that much?
It does not. To me, you
could make a Super Bowl spot for 100,000 that could be bonkers amazing.
That's right.
You could.
That's right.
The industry has decided you can't.
That's right.
And I wonder, with your incredible agency background and being in a more contemporary company, the reason I think this series, you can see my energy's high, A, because I respect you from afar and I'm excited to get connected, but B, I think you having one foot in both places leads to the marketers that I think are going to create change. I came from the other place that people viewed my opinions on this as not right, wrong, bullshit, or you know, disruptor. I'm like, no, this shit's practical.
Yeah, it's just true.
And I think watching great marketers come from agencies of that kind of fidelity to go into companies like this are going to be the ones that actually drive the change. Make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I always think that like my job is to figure out how to merge the two things that like I know now, right? Like when I joined Facebook many years ago, I didn't have this like data-driven bottom of funnel. I have that now.
Correct.
And so how do you merge that with like the creativity from like Wyden and Kennedy and Bacardi and all of that? How do you bring all of that together?
This was a real pleasure.
Good to hang, Marta.
Talk to you soon.
Later.